The hallway lights had that particular amber quality at 7 in the evening, the kind that made everything look softer, more forgiving, like a memory you're not sure really happened. Through the half-open door of room 204, Daniel Reed could see her still bent over student papers, red pen moving in that careful, deliberate way she had, circling, underlining, writing encouragement in the margins of someone else's dreams. It was the third time this week he'd found her there, past closing, and something about the sight made him pause at the threshold, one hand still resting on his security guard belt, the other holding a coffee he'd poured, without thinking why he'd poured two. The equation was still faintly visible on the whiteboard behind her, some complex algebraic problem she must have written for herself. Not for 7-year-olds, and he recognized it immediately, the way a man who'd spent 12 years decoding encrypted intelligence might recognize a pattern no one else would see. He'd meant to just keep walking his rounds, check the locks, go home to his daughter and their quiet dinner for two. But instead, he found himself knocking softly on the doorframe, watching as she looked up with those tired eyes that somehow still managed to smile. What he didn't know yet was that in about 30 seconds, she would laugh and say something that sounded like a joke. "Solve this equation and I'll marry you." And his entire carefully constructed life of routine and safety and not feeling too much would crack wide open, because he would solve it, and she would stop laughing, and neither of them would ever be the same again. Daniel had been working at Lincoln Elementary for exactly 2 years and 4 months when he first noticed Sarah Parker beyond the professional pleasantries they exchanged in passing. It wasn't dramatic. No orchestral music swelling like in those movies his ex-wife used to love. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late September when he heard her voice drifting through an open classroom door, patient and warm, as she explained long division to a struggling student. She'd stayed 40 minutes after dismissal just to make sure one kid understood, and something about that dedication lodged itself in his chest and refused to leave. He started noticing the small things after that. The navy blue hair clip she wore every Wednesday, how she hummed old jazz standards while erasing whiteboards, the faint scent of peppermint tea that lingered in her classroom. These observations became part of his evening routine, small focal points in a life that had become carefully managed to keep everything stable and safe. His daughter Lily had been the one to break through first. 7 years old with her mother's dark hair and his stubbornness, she'd come home from school 3 weeks into the semester, absolutely glowing. "Miss Parker says I'm getting better at reading," she'd announced over dinner, and Daniel had seen something in her eyes he hadn't seen in the 2 years since the divorce. Genuine excitement about learning. That night, after Lily had gone to bed clutching the book Miss Parker had lent her, Daniel stood in the kitchen washing dishes and admitted to himself that Sarah Parker was someone who really saw his daughter. And that mattered more than he knew how to express. The coffee thing had started about a month ago, completely by accident. He'd noticed the staff room pot still warm one evening, poured 2 cups without thinking, and left one outside her door. She'd never said anything about it directly, but the next morning there'd been a small package of his favorite brand in his mailbox, with a sticky note that said only, "Thank you." After that, it became their quiet exchange. He'd leave coffee, she'd leave small thank you notes or occasionally a homemade cookie, and neither acknowledged it during daylight hours when professional boundaries mattered. But tonight was different. Tonight he'd knocked, and she'd invited him in, and now he was standing in her classroom at 7:15 with 2 cups of coffee and no idea what he'd been thinking. Sarah looked up from her papers, pushing a strand of hair behind her ear, and smiled that tired smile that made something in his chest pull tight. "You're here late again, Miss Parker," he said, falling back on formality. "Third time this week." She laughed softly, gesturing to the mountain of papers. "Please, call me Sarah when it's just us. These won't grade themselves, and I want them back by Friday. They worked so hard. He stepped further into the room, setting one coffee on her desk, and she reached for it immediately, wrapping her hands around the warmth. "Your students are lucky," he said quietly. "Lily talks about you constantly. She thinks you're the smartest person in the world." Sarah's face softened, in a way that made her look younger, more vulnerable. "Lily's wonderful. She's really come out of her shell this month. The other day she volunteered to read aloud, and a month ago she wouldn't even make eye contact during circle time." She paused, looking at him with something like curiosity. "She mentioned you help her with homework every night. That's not as common as you'd think." Daniel leaned against the doorframe, trying to look casual. "It's just us two. Her mother's not really in the picture anymore. I have to make sure she's okay, that she knows someone's paying attention." The words came out rougher than intended, carrying more weight than a casual conversation should hold, and he saw Sarah register it, saw her expression shift from professional to something more personal. There was a moment of silence, comfortable, but loaded with things neither was saying. Then Daniel, trying to lighten the mood, said, "You should head home soon, though." "It's late. Guys these days don't even look for women who care this much about equations." He'd meant it as a joke, but Sarah's response surprised him. She laughed, a real laugh, then stood up and walked to the whiteboard, picking up a marker. "Equations, huh? You know what?" She started writing, her handwriting quick and confident, and within seconds, there was a complex algebraic equation taking shape, something that belonged in a college classroom. When she finished, she turned to him with a grin that was half challenge, half joke. "Solve this equation and I'll marry you." She was laughing as she said it, clearly not serious, just a tired teacher making a joke after a long day. But Daniel didn't laugh. Instead, he stepped closer to the board, studying the equation with an intensity that must have registered because Sarah's laughter faltered, then stopped entirely. He could feel her watching him, could sense the shift from playful to something else, but he was already reaching for the marker, already seeing the solution unfold the way he used to see patterns in encrypted communications, the way his brain still worked, even though he'd walked away from that life 5 years ago. He wrote methodically, each step flowing naturally, aware this was revealing something he'd been careful to keep hidden. When he set the marker down and turned to face her, the solution complete behind him, Sarah's expression had transformed completely. The playful teacher was gone, replaced by someone genuinely shocked, genuinely curious, and maybe genuinely interested. "How did you?" she started, then trailed off, eyes moving from him to the board and back. "That's a university-level differential equation. I wrote it because I thought it would be impossible for... I didn't think..." She stopped, realizing what she was about to say might be insulting. Daniel smiled, but there was something sad in it. "So," he said, keeping his tone light even though his heart was beating faster. "When's the wedding?" The joke landed awkwardly, and for a moment neither knew what to say. Then Sarah laughed nervously. "I was joking. That was just... I used to love math. Before I became a teacher, I was..." She stopped, deciding whether to be vulnerable. "It doesn't matter," Daniel said quietly. "It does." "What were you before?" Sarah looked at him for a long moment, then sighed. "I almost went to graduate school for mathematics. Had a full scholarship to Stanford. But my mom got sick. I stayed home. And by the time she was better, I'd missed my window. Teaching elementary is stable. It's enough." The way she said that last word made Daniel's chest ache. "Stable is important," he said softly. "Trust me. I know." There was something in his voice that made Sarah look at him more carefully, taking in details she'd maybe noticed, but never questioned. The way he carried himself, the precision of his movements, the fact that he'd just solved a problem most people with bachelor's degrees couldn't touch. "You're not just a security guard, are you?" she asked quietly. Daniel found himself at a crossroads. He could deflect, or he could take a risk. "No," he said simply. "I'm not. But I am now, and that's what matters." Before the conversation could go further, his phone buzzed. Lily's babysitter. "I should go," he said, and Sarah nodded, looking both relieved and disappointed. "Thank you for the coffee, and for the conversation. It's been a while since I talked about real things." Daniel moved toward the door, then paused. "Lock up when you leave." "And Sarah? That scholarship you turned down?" "It's not too late." He left before she could respond, but walking down the empty hallway, he could feel something shifting inside him, some carefully maintained wall beginning to crack. When he got to his car and sat in the darkness, his hands were shaking slightly. It had been 5 years since he'd felt anything like this. 5 years since he'd let himself want something beyond safe routine. As he drove home, he glanced back at the school and saw the lights still on in room 204. He wondered if Sarah was looking at the equation he'd solved, wondered if she was asking herself the same questions. For the first time in a very long time, Daniel Reed allowed himself to imagine what it might feel like to be truly seen by someone who might understand. Over the next few weeks, something subtle shifted between them. Daniel found himself timing his rounds to coincide with Sarah's late hours, and she found herself staying late more often. They never acknowledged this dance, this careful choreography of accidental meetings and conversations that lasted just a little too long. One evening in mid-October, Daniel brought coffee as usual, but this time he didn't leave it outside. He knocked, and when Sarah invited him in, he stayed. They talked about nothing important, a book Lily was reading, something funny from recess. The weather turning colder, but underneath was a current of something else, something neither was ready to name. The small gestures multiplied. Daniel started leaving not just coffee, but occasionally a crossword puzzle he'd partially completed. Sarah left books she thought Lily might enjoy in his mailbox, always with a note about why she'd chosen that story. They developed a shorthand, a way of communicating that didn't require formal distance. But with this connection came complications. Mrs. Henderson, the 4th grade teacher with a reputation for gossip, started making pointed comments in the staff room about how friendly Miss Parker seemed with the evening security guard. Then one afternoon, Principal Rivera pulled Sarah aside. "I'm not suggesting anything inappropriate is happening," she said carefully, "but parents notice things. They talk. Be careful about appearances." Sarah assured her there was nothing to be careful about, but the conversation left her shaken. That evening, when Daniel came by as had become routine, Sarah was distant. When he asked if something was wrong, she brushed him off with a tight smile. For 3 days after that, Sarah left school by 5:30 before Daniel's shift started. She stopped staying late, stopped leaving notes, stopped all their small connections. Daniel noticed immediately but didn't push, just felt the absence like a physical ache. Lily noticed too, asking at dinner why Miss Parker seemed sad, and Daniel had no good answer. On the 4th day, Daniel was doing his parking lot check when he saw Sarah's car refusing to start. She turned the key over, and he could hear the engine struggling. Rain had started falling, one of those sudden October downpours, and through the windshield he could see her shoulders slump. Without thinking, he walked over and tapped on her window. "Need a ride?" he asked, and Sarah looked at him with equal parts relief and uncertainty. "I don't want to be a bother," he almost laughed. "You're not. Come on, you're getting soaked." She grabbed her bag and followed him to his truck. They drove in silence for the first few minutes, just rain hammering the roof and windshield wipers swishing rhythmically. Then Sarah reached forward and turned on the radio, and by some perfect coincidence, the station was playing an old standard, something slow and romantic that filled the cab with melody. Daniel drove slower than necessary, taking the long way, and neither commented on it. When he finally pulled up in front of her building, Sarah didn't immediately get out. Instead, she turned to him and said, "I've been avoiding you. The principal said people were talking, and I got scared. Not of you, but of what it might mean if I let myself." She trailed off. "I know," Daniel said quietly. "Your job matters. Your reputation matters. I would never want to put that at risk." Sarah looked at him with something like frustration. "That's just it. You're too understanding, too careful. And it makes me want to be less careful, which scares me." Before Daniel could respond, she leaned across the console and kissed him quickly on the cheek, then pulled back like she'd surprised herself. "Thank you for the ride," she said. And then she was out of the truck and running through the rain, leaving Daniel sitting with his heart pounding. That night, after Lily was asleep, Daniel sat in his kitchen forcing himself to think clearly. He'd met Jennifer when he was 26 and newly minted as a federal agent, all confidence about his path in life. They'd married too quickly, had Lily too soon, and then his job consumed him. He'd spent weeks away on assignments he couldn't discuss, missed birthdays and anniversaries and Lily's first steps. He'd come home early one day and found Jennifer with someone else, and the worst part was, he couldn't even blame her. He was never there. The divorce was quiet and civil, and when it was done, Daniel walked away from the agency without a second thought. He'd taken his savings, bought rental properties for income, and took the most mundane job he could find at Lily's school because he wanted to see her every single day. He'd promised himself, never again would he choose anything over the people he loved. But now, 5 years later, Daniel realized he'd kept that promise so well that he'd stopped letting himself want anything beyond safety. Sarah, with her deferred dreams and her equation, had reminded him he was still capable of wanting more. The thought terrified him because wanting meant risking loss. But then he thought about Lily asking why Miss Parker seemed sad, and Sarah saying she wanted to be less careful, and he realized the biggest risk wasn't in reaching for something, but in living so safely you forgot you were alive. The next morning, he went to work with a decision made. Sarah must have come to a similar conclusion, because when he walked past her classroom during afternoon rounds, she was standing at the door as if waiting. "Can we talk?" she asked, and he followed her into the classroom. She closed the door. They'd never been alone with the door closed before. Sarah took a breath, then said, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to just listen. Don't try to make it easier, just let me say it." Daniel nodded, and she continued. "Yesterday in your truck, I kissed you. It was impulsive and probably inappropriate, and I've been up all night deciding if I should apologize. But I don't want to apologize. I'm tired of being careful. I gave up graduate school to be safe. I became a teacher because it was stable. And I've been telling myself for years that stable is enough. But then you solved my equation, and you bring me coffee, and you see me, and I'm realizing maybe I've been settling." She paused. "I'm also scared because I don't really know who you are. I know you're Lily's dad, and you're kind, and you can solve differential equations, but I don't know why you're working as a security guard when you're clearly capable of more. I need to know what you're hiding, because I'm pretty sure I'm falling for you, and I need to know if it's safe or if I'm going to end up hurt." Daniel felt something crack open in his chest. "My name is Daniel Reed," he said quietly, "and I was a federal agent for 12 years. Counterintelligence, mostly Eastern European networks. I was good at it. Too good. It consumed everything. My time, my marriage. I missed my daughter's first steps because I was in Prague. I forgot my anniversary 3 years running." He paused. "I came home early one day and found my wife with another man. And the worst part? I couldn't be angry. She'd been alone for years. So I quit, took my pension, bought rental properties so I'd never have to choose work over Lily again, and became a security guard because I wanted to see her every single day. I wanted to prove I could be the kind of father who shows up. His voice got rough. You asked what I'm hiding. I'm hiding that I spent 12 years being someone important, and now I'm nobody. Just a guy who checks locks. Most days that's fine. But then you came along and looked at me like I might be worth knowing, not for what I used to be, but for who I am now. And that's terrifying because I don't know if who I am now is enough. Sarah crossed the space between them and took his hand, her fingers warm and solid. You're enough, she said simply. And I'm sorry your wife couldn't see that, but her loss is my gain if you're willing to take a chance on a woman who's too scared of her own dreams. Daniel looked down at their joined hands. The principal warned you. People are talking. This could affect your career. Sarah smiled, but it was freer, more real than her teacher smile. Then let them talk. I've spent 30 years being careful, and where has it gotten me? I'm teaching elementary school when I could have been researching at Stanford. I'm alone every night when I could be living. So yes, this is risky, but for the first time in my life, I'm choosing something that feels true instead of safe. Daniel lifted his free hand and cupped her face gently, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Instead, she leaned into his touch, trembling slightly. I need you to know I'm not good at this, he said softly. I'm good at strategy and keeping people at arm's length. But I want to try. With you, I want to try. Sarah whispered, then try. And Daniel leaned in slowly, and when their lips met, it was gentle and careful and absolutely intentional. They pulled apart after a moment, foreheads touching, both breathing harder. So, I guess you solved the equation, Sarah said with a hint of laughter. Does this mean you're holding me to that marriage promise? Daniel smiled. Not yet. But someday, when we're ready. I'm patient, Sarah. I can wait for things that matter. The next few weeks unfolded carefully. At school, they were Miss Parker and Mr. Reed, maintaining appropriate distance. But after hours, they were Sarah and Daniel, learning each other in coffee shops far from school, in evening walks through parks, in phone conversations that lasted until midnight. Sarah told him about her mother's illness and the guilt she still carried. Daniel told her about missions that haunted him, about the colleague who died because of his decision, about how he'd used work as a shield. They shared their damage carefully, and neither flinched from what they found. Lily noticed the change in her father. One morning at breakfast, she looked at him and said, Dad, you've been smiling a lot. Did something good happen? Daniel paused and decided on honesty. Yeah, sweetheart. Something good happened. Lily tilted her head, studying him. Does it have to do with Miss Parker? I saw you look at her funny. Daniel carefully set down the juice. What kind of funny? Lily shrugged. The kind Grandma says means you like someone. Do you like Miss Parker? Daniel looked at his 7-year-old and chose truth. I do. Is that okay with you? Lily thought about it, chewing her waffle. She's really nice, and she makes you smile again. You haven't smiled like that since before Mom left. So, yeah, it's okay. The simplicity of that acceptance made Daniel's eyes sting. That evening, he told Sarah about the conversation, and she laughed and cried at the same time, touched by Lily's approval but nervous about what it meant. She's perceptive, Sarah said. Last week she told me you seemed happier. And she was glad, because she didn't like when you were sad. Daniel pulled her close. Kids see things. My job is to make sure what she's seeing is healthy, that we're not rushing something that isn't ready. But not everyone was as accepting. Mrs. Henderson made pointed comments about teachers who couldn't maintain boundaries. Then one afternoon, Principal Rivera called Sarah in again. I've heard the talk, she said carefully. I'm not saying you're doing anything wrong. Your personal life is your business. But parents hear things. The school board hears things. I need you both to be discreet, for your protection and for Lily's. That little girl doesn't need classmates teasing her. Sarah assured her they were being careful, but the conversation shook her. That evening, when Daniel asked about her day, she burst into tears, overwhelmed by the weight of opinions and the impossible position they were in. "I can't do this," she said through tears. "I can't be gossip. I can't put Lily in a position where kids tease her. I can't risk my career for something that might not work." Daniel listened, patient and steady. "So what are you saying? Do you want to end this?" Sarah looked at him, at this man who'd become essential, and realized she didn't want to end anything. "No, I'm saying I'm scared, and I don't know how to balance everything. Being professional at work, real with you, fair to Lily, true to myself. It feels impossible." Daniel took her hands. "Then we take it one day at a time. We're careful at school. We don't put Lily in awkward positions. We let people talk, and we don't give them ammunition. And we trust that what we have is worth the complications." He paused. "But Sarah, I need you to know I've failed at this before. I lost a marriage because I couldn't balance what I wanted with what someone needed. If you're with me, you need to know I might fail again." Sarah cupped his face. "Stop. You're not your failed marriage any more than I'm my deferred dreams. We're two people trying to build something new. Yes, it's messy, but that doesn't mean it's wrong. It means it's real." 3 months into their relationship, life settled into a rhythm. Professional at school, real everywhere else, careful not to put Lily in the middle. Saturday mornings became their time. Daniel making pancakes, while Lily taught Sarah card games. And those mornings felt like the life Daniel never quite believed he could have. Sarah enrolled in an online graduate mathematics course, something she did late at night, and she'd light up talking about the work in a way that made Daniel's chest ache with pride. They didn't talk about the future in concrete terms, but it was there anyway, implied in the way they made room for each other, and how Lily started calling Sarah by her first name at home, in the drawer Daniel had at Sarah's apartment, and her toothbrush at his house. Then came the school's winter showcase. Lily had a small role and had been practicing for weeks, nervous and excited. The night before, during final rehearsal, Lily froze on stage, suddenly overwhelmed, and started to cry. Sarah, helping coordinate the event, immediately went to her, kneeling to her level. Daniel watched from the back, his heart breaking but trusting Sarah. "Hey," Sarah said gently. "It's okay to be scared. Everyone gets scared when they're doing something brave." Lily sobbed. "But what if I mess up? What if Dad is disappointed?" Sarah glanced toward Daniel in the shadows, then back at Lily. "Your dad could never be disappointed in you. You know how I know? Because he shows up. Every single day. He left a job he loved to watch you grow up. That's not the kind of love that depends on perfect performances. That's the kind that just is, no matter what." Daniel, listening, felt something crack inside, some last piece of armor falling away. Lily stopped crying. "Really?" Sarah nodded. "Really. And I'm going to be right there tomorrow night. And if you forget a line, I'll whisper it. And your dad will be there too. And we'll both be proud, no matter what." Lily hugged her. And Daniel realized this was what family could look like. Not perfect, but real and present. After rehearsal, after Lily had gone home with the babysitter, Daniel found Sarah in the empty auditorium. "Thank you," he said, "for what you said to Lily about showing up. I needed to hear that too." Sarah studied his face. "Daniel, I need to tell you something, and it's probably too soon, but I can't keep holding it back." His heart rate picked up. "I'm in love with you," she said simply. I'm in love with you, and with Lily, and with the life we're building. I know it's messy, and there are still people who think it's inappropriate, but I don't care anymore. I wanted you to know." Daniel stood there, this woman who'd challenged him with an equation and opened his heart, and realized she'd said what he'd been feeling for weeks. "I love you too," he said, and it came out rough. "I've loved you since you wrote that equation. I've loved you through every scared conversation. I've loved you even when it terrified me." Sarah kissed him then, there in the empty auditorium with stage lights still on, and it felt like a promise. "So what do we do now?" she asked when they pulled apart. Daniel smiled. "Now we keep showing up. We keep being brave. We keep building this one day at a time." The showcase the next evening was a success. Lily remembered her lines, bowed to thunderous applause, and immediately ran off stage to hug both Daniel and Sarah. No one commented that they stood together, that Sarah's hand briefly rested on his shoulder. The gossip had quieted, or maybe they'd stopped caring. Standing there watching Lily glow, Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in years, hope for the future, not just for stability, but for joy. 6 months after that first conversation in room 204, life had settled into comfortable rhythm. Sarah kept taking graduate courses and was considering a part-time community college position while keeping her elementary job. They'd become a family without formally declaring it, just through accumulated weight of shared dinners and homework help and weekend adventures and quiet evenings where they existed comfortably together. Daniel's rental properties provided stability. Sarah's work kept her engaged, and together they'd created something neither had planned, but both needed. One evening in late spring, almost 2 years after that first equation, Daniel found himself back in room 204. Sarah had asked him to meet her there, saying she had something to show him. He walked through familiar hallways with confidence now, not the careful watchfulness of a security guard. And when he reached her classroom, he found Sarah at the whiteboard. But this time, she wasn't grading or looking tired. She wore a dress he'd never seen. There were candles on her desk, and the whiteboard had a single line written in her careful handwriting. "Daniel Reed," it read. "You solved my equation. You kept your promise. Will you let me keep mine?" He stared at the words, processing slowly. And then Sarah turned to him with a nervous smile, holding a small box. "I know this is backward," she said, voice shaking. "I know traditionally the man proposes, but you've been patient for 2 years, and I've been ready for a 1.5 years, and I realized I didn't want to wait for you to think the timing was perfect, because the timing is always imperfect, and that's okay." Daniel felt tears he didn't try to hide. Sarah continued, "You taught me what it means to show up. You taught me that second chances are real, and that the bravest thing is trying again after failure. So I'm asking you, officially, in the room where this started, will you marry me?" Daniel crossed to her in 3 strides, took the box from her shaking hands, and kissed her like his life depended on it. When he pulled back, he was laughing and crying. "Yes," he said hoarsely. "Yes, 1,000 times, yes. I would have asked months ago, but I kept thinking we should wait. But I've never been more certain of anything. I love you. I love the life we've built. I love that you're asking me in this room, because that's exactly who we are." Sarah laughed, relief and joy flooding her face, and opened the box to reveal a simple silver band. "I know we'll have to do this officially. Get you a ring, too," she said, sliding it onto his finger. "But I wanted you to have something now. Something that says, I choose you. I see you. I'm not going anywhere." Daniel held her close, feeling the ring, this tangible symbol of a promise he'd stopped believing he deserved. "When do you want to do this officially?" Sarah smiled. "Whenever you want. Tomorrow. Next year. I'm not in a hurry. I just wanted you to know I'm committed, that this is forever, as far as I'm concerned." They stood there in room 204, in the amber evening light that had witnessed their beginning. And Daniel felt the full weight of gratitude for the path that brought him here. He'd lost a marriage, lost his sense of purpose, rebuilt himself into someone small and safe. He'd met a woman who challenged him with an equation and opened his heart with vulnerability. And now, holding his fiancée in the classroom where it all began, Daniel understood that the most beautiful things were the ones you built together, day by day, with patience and presence and willingness to keep trying. They would marry in the spring, in a small ceremony with Lily as witness. Sarah would keep teaching. Daniel would continue being present for his daughter and the woman he loved, building a life that was ordinary and extraordinary all at once. But all of that was ahead. For now, there was just this moment, 2 people in a classroom, an equation solved, a promise made, and the beginning of everything that mattered.